Welcome to Module 1. In this module, we'll discuss introduction to technology and innovation and concepts of relevance for MSMEs, including entrepreneurship. So let's first discuss the overview of Africa, its size, its landscape, and human capital. Africa is the world's second largest continent, comprising of about 1.3 billion people. It is highly affluent in both renewable and non-renewable natural resources. This means land, water, oil, natural gas, mineral, forest, and wildlife. In addition to this, Africa is also highly populated with human capital. As such, education, skills, and the health of its people play a very pivotal role in the transformation of African countries. Research tells us that Africa ranks right now zero point 0.4 on the Human Capital Index score, meaning that only 40% it constitutes as productive. Being this low on the index rate has implications on its people, families, as well as the economy. According to the World Bank, countries at the bottom of the index will register the heaviest foregone income and be left furthest behind in the global economy. Nevertheless, the new urgency and efforts putting towards the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and MSME related policies have potential to turn the situation around and impact economic development across the region. So, what is an MSME's economic contribution? Well, MSMEs play a major role in most economies, particularly in developing countries. They represent about 90% of businesses with 50% of employment worldwide. Formal MSMEs contribute up to 40% of national income, GDP, in emerging economies. One definition for informal sector is that all economic activities by workers and economic units that are in law and practice not covered or insufficiently covered by formal arrangements. While there is no standard definition to differentiate formal versus informal MSMEs, because it varies across regions and countries. Informal sector is a major employer with about 1.8 billion, almost 60% employed under informal sector worldwide. When focusing on Africa alone, the informal sector representation goes up to 85%. Here's a figure that reflects or highlights the different informalities that we see in developing countries. For example, we can compare Argentina, which is about 20%, to Kenya, which is well over 45%, to Zimbabwe, which is under 45%. These are adults who report being self employed or report owning a business with two or fewer employees. Now, the informal economy is also made up of women. Women are often exposed to informal employment and have more challenges accessing financial services. When you look at an enterprise, it can be classified into different categories according to their size. Most common criteria for this is the number of employees, as we saw in the previous figure. Now, the number of employees is what gives it the criteria as either micro, small, or medium enterprise. Again, there is no standard definition across countries and regions, but we have found to help us illustrate the differences in criteria is the number of employees. Here's a table that gives you some idea of what this looks like. So we have a few countries: Botswana, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, South Africa. As you can see, the number of employees in the third column, whether 1 to 4, 5 to 20, 21 to 100, helps to identify whether you are micro, small, or medium. And on the last column, gives you an idea of about how much in US dollar this enterprise is making or can make on average. And so there are many indicators that help define the size of enterprises across regions, and that's why they vary across countries. For instance, in Zambia, not only has the number of employees and sales turnover become an indicator, but also the total fixed investments and legal status are also indicators for whether you are a micro, whether you are a small, a medium enterprise. Nevertheless, whether informal or formal, MSMEs are engines of economic development in Africa. Let's take a look at some statistics. In South Africa, 91% of all businesses, 60% of total employment, and 34% contribute to GDP. MSMEs in Tanzania amount to about 60% of contribution towards GDP. In Ghana, 92% of total businesses, Zambia, 99.5% of businesses. They greatly contribute to job creation, employment, tax provision, as well as the contribution towards GDP. When you look at all of Africa, MSMEs represent almost 70% or more of job opportunities. And these opportunities are not just accessible to the educated, but also the uneducated, the privileged and underprivileged, and those who are marginalized in the labor force, those who have skills in electrician, plumber, hairdresser, and the likes. And so what are some of the challenges and opportunities among least developed countries for MSMEs? Well, let's first define LDCs. LDCs are low-income countries confronting severe structural impediments to sustainable development. They are highly vulnerable to economic and environmental shocks and have low levels of human assets. Worldwide, there are about 47 LDCs, 33 in Africa, 13 in Asia, 1 in Latin America. And despite 3 successive programs of action, the Millennial Development Goals 1, 2, and 3, these LDCs are far from meeting the internationally agreed goals. Here's a nice world map that provides global representation of least developed countries. The regions marked in red represent countries that were least developed by 2021 of February. Here's another depiction which illustrates the frequency and percentage share of LDCs across global regions as well. Africa leading in the representation of LDCs. So despite their contribution, MSMEs in developing and least developed countries face substantial impacts. Some of them include lack of coherent policy, regulatory frameworks, lack of access to finance, imperfect information and capacity gaps, lack of access to basic infrastructure, entrepreneurship, and really a failure to invest in women entrepreneurs. Although they are beneficial to the economy, we still have to address the issues surrounding the challenges and present opportunities for growth, especially in the context of technology and innovation. And so that brings us to the concept of the fourth industrial revolution. It's happening right now. Here's an illustration to summarize the fourth industrial revolution. We had the first, which focused on mechanica, the mechanization, water power, and stream power. The second industrial revolution focused on mass production, assembly line, and electricity. The third focused on computer and automation. And the fourth, which is happening right now, focuses on cyber physical systems. So let's dig a little deeper into the fourth industrial revolution. But we can't do that until we understand what came before. So the first industrial revolution began in the 18th century through the use of water and steam power to mechanize production. The second industrial revolution used electric power to create mass production. This began in the 19th century. The third revolution was very pivotal because it entailed the discovery and the use of electronics and information technology to partially automate processes and production. This included the use of memory, programmable controls, and computers. And then in the fourth industrial revolution, also known as Industry 4.0, was built on the back of the third revolution. This is the digital revolution that started in the middle of the last century, and the digital revolution that we're experiencing today as we mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. They're categorized by the advancement of merging physical, digital, and biological spheres. Now, all three revolutions, including the fourth, were impacting the economy and improving the quality of life. For example, the fourth revolution has increased the number of consumers in the digital world, whether social media, watching films online, shopping, paying for bills, food deliveries. It is undeniable the shift from brick and mortar to click and order. The fourth revolution, however, has come with many challenges. Long-term efficiency and productivity leading to greater inequalities. Automation and artificial intelligence is disrupting the labor markets. With economic growth reliant on its working force, MSMEs across Africa are being threatened by the fourth industrial revolution, even though there are opportunities as well as threats. So how do we enable entrepreneurship through this? Well, the ability to utilize technology as the ultimate enabler of business success is the root concept of technology-based entrepreneurship. While businesses have transitioned from manual to physical labor to digital access, from online categories to online booking to online monitoring and such, there are several other needs to adopt in this fourth industrial revolution. Entrepreneurs who have managed in this transition have been able to minimize costs, maximize profits, reach wider markets, expand services such as door-to-door delivery, as well as, on the other hand, consumers have been able to save time and money due to reduced shopping time and expedited deliveries. Let's take a look at the global e-commerce sales have increased to trillions over the last few years. There's been a tremendous rise of e-commerce sales over the past 6 years, such that consumer behavior has changed, which calls for MSMEs to consider the evolution and be more technically advanced in their business model. And this will continue to increase due to the impacts of the pandemic and other impacts and factors to come. So what are some of the determinants of business successes and failures from an MSME's perspective? Key factors to consider when growing your business include financial management, production and operation management, marketing management, human capital management, consumer relationship management, entrepreneurship, as well as technology and innovation management. Now, there are strengths and weaknesses for us to look at when we analyze the strengths of MSMEs, as well as opportunities and strengths. Some of the strengths include access to an abundance of resources, availability of raw materials, a younger generation that's dominating the continent, as well as access to research and development initiated by the government. Other weaknesses include the lack of basic capabilities, bookkeeping, planning tools, leveraging relevant technology, and cultivating human resources. We often see weaknesses showing up in low productivity, weak back end, forward linkages, constraints on budget and infrastructure, manual and labor intensive production, lack of innovation, and so forth. But there's also opportunities to consider, opportunities in technology to transfer the management of business practices, the demand for better job creation, new competition and startups, large size of incoming youth population. These are also opportunities while we identify the threats. And some of the threats really are, the Africa to Asia ratio of labor productivity has decreased, as well as interest rates and collateral requirements sometimes can be too high, which deter investments when looking to build and grow businesses. And so with that said, we have concluded Module 1. Congratulations on completing Module 1, and we look forward to seeing you in Module 2.